I'm going to start by introducing the panel members, and then we'll go straight into the discussion. My name is Olufunmi Adepoju, and I'm the managing partner of Pearl Mutual Consulting and Pearl Bridge Capital Managers. So I'm going to be your moderator for today. My firms, we have a consulting firm that focuses on business advisory and capital raising for local businesses. And then we have the Capital Managers, which is a business raising and impact fund. With me today, I have some distinguished guests, and they will be joining me on the panel. First, I would like to introduce Damilola Aloba. He is the partner strategy and transactions, consumer markets, and the leader West Africa EY. He has over 23 years work experience in consulting and investment banking, and he's currently a partner at the EY, taking in charge of their strategy and transactions. Please join me in welcoming Damilola Aloba. And next, I bring on Chuma Ajene. He's the head of strategic investments, Access Bank. He holds an MBA from Harvard Business School. He is currently Access Bank's global head of strategic investments and leads the group's investments and funding activities across its various business segments. Please join me in welcoming Chuma this evening. Next, I bring on Joseph Adionese. I'm sorry if I've not called the name well. Emile Jeze. He is a partner, Udo Udoma and Bello Osage, which is a law firm in Nigeria. Joseph is a partner in the banking and finance, capital markets, tax, and fintech practice, in the practice group of the Udo Udoma and Bello Osage, a tier 1 full-service commercial law firm in Nigeria. He has over 15 years of active practice and a significant contribution to his areas of practice. Please join me in welcoming Joseph today. And next, I bring on Benga Hassan. He is a managing partner at Gentile Capital Management Limited. Benga is a managing partner in the firm, and he oversees the principal investments, private equity, assets management, among other things. He has over 28 years work experience in private equity, principal investing, financial advisory, both internationally and other Western African markets. Please join me in welcoming Benga this afternoon. I would like to confirm if Chukwu Erika Achum is here. Are you in the house? Sorry, I just got your profile. So he's the CEO of Falcon Aerospace Limited. He's a prominent figure in the aviation industry, known for his entrepreneurial spirit, innovation, and exceptional leadership skills. He is the founder of aviation service outfit, VivaJet, technology platforms, amongst other things. So today, please join me in welcoming Chukwu Erika to the stage as well. All right, I think next year I need to talk about gender balance for the Nigerian. So at least I'm representing the women folks today. So I just had to say that so that at least I get it out of the way. But women are doing great things in Nigeria, don't worry. And we do have a lot of women professional executives from Nigeria in the meeting today. So before I sit down, I just want to also say one or two things about Nigeria. So because we'd like to have enough time to discuss and allow you to ask us questions today. Nigeria is, of course, as we know, one of the biggest markets in Africa. And we have an economy of over $500 billion. We are 220 million in population and counting, because I'm sure we are more than 220 million right now. We have a lot of sectors that are doing quite well and that has the capacity and potential for growth. And so, I mean, those are the reasons why we should be talking about Nigeria right now. In terms of our macroeconomic environment, our GDP for the second quarter, Q2 to 2024, the economy grew at about 3.19%, which is an improvement on what we had from the previous year. And it's showing that the economy is beginning to show signs of recovery. Inflation is still high, and that I would say is muted. I wouldn't say it's declining yet, even though we're seeing signs of decline. Analysts still expect that because of some of the other things that are not yet falling in place, it might still increase. The exchange rate has been liberated, and I think that's one of the good things that we'll be talking about today, and is market determined and not fixed by government anymore. It depends on which day you're looking at the government portals, but as of a few days ago, it was about 1,600 to $1. The MPR, which is the monetary policy rate, is at about 27.27%, and the foreign reserve as at October 3rd was 38.6 billion. This might be considered low, but it is the trend that is important. If you look at it on a year-on-year basis and year-to-date, we have a consistent growth, which means the government is putting in things that can actually help the economy improve and recover. Our total debt is still high. However, the crude oil prices are in our favor right now. What is most interesting about the crude oil is not only are we selling crude oil externally now, but we are beginning to sell locally in Naira to the just completed Dangote refinery. This we expect would also have some positive impact on the economy and the contribution of crude oil to the economy. Over a long period of time, we had situation where, in terms of revenue, crude oil constitute the greatest proportion of our revenue, but the addition to GDP was a different story. But from the last quarter of, that's Q2 2024, we are beginning to see a positive addition from crude oil to the Nigerian economy. So if you're looking for transactions in that space, this would be a good time. Unemployment is relatively still high, and what bothers me more is the fact that the youth unemployment and underemployment is higher than the global unemployment position. However, I do believe that there are quite a number of policies, like tax policies, that we're going to be talking about today, that is going in the right direction. We got some new tax policies coming from government last week, addressing or trying to reduce the taxes on small and medium-scale enterprises. All of this, we believe, will move the economy in the right direction. Let me not, I know I said I'm the only woman on the board, on the panel, but I don't want to take all the time. So let me talk to the others now so that they can add a lot more to what I'm saying. Please, once again, help me to welcome my very powered panel. I hope you can still hear me. Hello. All right. Welcome, everyone, and it's wonderful to be here again in this 2024 AFSIC investment section for Nigeria. I'm going to be starting with you, Benga, and I would like you to speak to the macro. I gave like an update on macro. What do you see in the macroeconomic environment for Nigeria now? What do you think what should investors be expecting in the near to medium term?
Okay, thanks. Yes, so I think, as you said, I'm Benga Hassan with Argentil. We're a principal investing private equity firm based out of Lagos. We invest in West Africa, principally Nigeria and Ghana. So normally, I'm normally a micro investor, right? So generally look at more bottom up. But in this case, I'll be talking about why I think it's a good time to be in Nigeria. And as I was about to say stuff, I saw Charlie walk in and I just said, oh, I can't quote stats because he will kill me if I quote the wrong thing. So, the reality is that Nigeria has been going through economic reforms. They're necessary, painful economic reforms, but the trajectory is to ensure that the private sector plays a much larger role in an economy that I think we've already talked about, was the largest in sub-Saharan Africa pre the number of devaluations that we've experienced. So I'm not sure where we stand exactly right now. Now, what are the key sort of, if I can say, reforms? One, we had the liberalization of the currency. So I'm sure if we were here 2 years ago, the biggest issue people would be saying is, how do I get my naira out? My naira is stuck in Nigeria. I need to get dollars. What we're seeing is a situation where we're seeing FX availability, FX trading close to where it was pre-COVID. With that, if you have naira based on a willing buyer, willing seller market, you can get your money out. Like I say, it's been painful because we've gone from an official rate of probably about 4.25 sometime in 2020 to about 1,600 that was noted. But that's a necessary adjustment because at the end of the day, we were artificially holding the currency at a rate that wasn't the true reflection. But I'll quote Charlie again, because I was in his panel earlier where he noted that Nigeria's currency is probably the cheapest right now. I think he quoted that Egypt was about 30% cheap. Second time it's happened, or I think so, in history, and Nigeria is actually cheaper. So now is the time to invest because you have a currency that is actually cheaper than it should be fundamentally. We currently have a trade surplus. In a situation where you have a trade surplus, you shouldn't have devaluation currency. But again, I guess as the naira is having to adjust based on the fact that it's been artificially held for some time, that relative adjustment means that it will take us some time to get to the true value. But as investors, I don't think you should wait until you have a true value to make a commitment because you are looking to invest, depending on whether you're a private equity investor like us, where you're looking to take a 5-year horizon. You would look to get in now such that you would benefit from coming in at a cheaper valuation relative to where it could be in a couple of years. I think on the other points, they've noted the points around we do have high inflation, but the good thing is we have a central bank governor that's determined to take the pain, which is necessary. So I think there was a shock, or at least based on investor sentiment, the view was he was going to hold interest rates at the last MPC, but he actually increased it by 50 basis points, increased CRR, which is the sort of rate they hold banks to, by 500 basis points. So he's clearly focused on trying to ensure that we do bring down inflation to a more reasonable rate, given it's currently somewhere around 32%. On the fiscal side, I think some of my colleagues will talk a bit more, but like was noted, there's been a focus on trying to reform the tax system to ensure that it's more investor friendly. There's been some announcements recently on removing VAT on certain products as a way to support investments, removing import duties as a way to ensure that people who import products, either primary products, are supporting their supply chain. So for example, manufacturers in pharmaceuticals, for example, as a way to ensure that they reduce the input cost. There's also been a setup of a tax reform body, and it's clear that the government is keen to implement some of the policies they've come up with, some of which I mentioned. So right now we're actually in a situation where I would say the African giant is moving slowly, but is moving in the right direction. And I think, as investors who are looking to take a long-term bet on a country, I think the time is right, because you don't want to come in when everybody's making their money and they're going out, right? So I think it's important for people to get their timing right and start making their investment commitments. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to just go straight to you, Damlola. We had a few discussions earlier about what sectors should investors be looking at, what is good to look at in Nigeria. Now, based on some of the transactions you're doing, can you give us more insight into what you believe would work well right now?
All right, thank you. I think it's important to, first of all, emphasize that in the last 15 months, there's been...
His mic.
In the last 15 months, the economy seems to have opened up a lot. We've seen a lot of activity in different sectors, which is quite interesting. From our own perspective as advisors, we've been a lot more busy than this time, maybe 2 years before. I think the interesting part of this is the fact that certain sectors continue to draw attention from investors. Obviously, technology, when you look at the level of internet penetration and mobile penetration, but more importantly, smartphone penetration, which is around 40 to 50% when you compare that to mobile penetration itself, which is about 97, 98%. So meaning that about 50% of the population thereabout now have smartphones and can go into digital kind of activities, digital banking activities, e-commerce, and all of that. So the fintech businesses continue to remain attractive, and more so when you take that down into the telecom space, we see that there's a lot of investment going into the sector by the MNOs, the mobile network operators, MTN. For example, Airtel was saying sometime some months back that they're going to invest about $700 million a year on an annual basis for the next 3 to 4 years to ramp up their 5G technology or infrastructure and fiber optics, as well as data centers. A lot of capital is going into data centers in Nigeria at the moment. And so that space is one sector that continues to attract investment and is attractive. I'll move from there into other sectors like healthcare. Strangely, if you take a look at the healthcare sector, it has always been a private sector-led sector, whereby little is being done. About 30% of funding into that sector is coming from the public sector. So today, a lot of private sector hospitals are expanding. A lot of people typically come to the UK to seek healthcare medical services. But today, you're beginning to see a lot more private sector-led hospitals providing the same care. And in fact, some renowned doctors are beginning to come back to Nigeria, to come and operate these hospitals. So in the area of not just healthcare service provision, you also have medical diagnostics. You also have health tech. If you link that to what is happening with broadband penetration and and the likes, health tech is important. Health insurance is also a key area. Health insurance penetration in Nigeria today is about 5%. You can imagine. So a lot of people do out-of-pocket, payments for their services, and also pharmaceutical distribution and the likes, logistics, and all of that. So if I take it a bit further into other areas like fintech, Nigeria is trying to diversify the energy mix and move away from fossil fuels. So you see a lot more investments going into renewables, solar, wind, and the likes. But more importantly, the oil and gas sector. The midstream oil sector, where a lot of investments is going into gas. I can't count the number of, investment projects I'm doing personally on CNG, LNG, LPG. I mean, I'm not trying to exaggerate, but it's just so strange that everybody's looking at that space all at the same time. So can I continue?
Thank you so much. I'm going to have to come back to you, and maybe when I come the second time, I'm sure the investors will really like to hear about the industries, but we need to also talk about some other things. So I come to you now, Joseph. I know you've done a lot in dealing with government and in your area, you know, looking at policies, bills, incentives that are coming out. Could you just educate us a little, 5 minutes, not more than 5 minutes, on what are some of the things that you think government has done, which hasn't been mentioned yet, that puts Nigeria in a better position to welcome investors?
Yeah, thank you for me. One key thing that has to do with investment in Nigeria will have to do with, first question investors ask you is, what is the regulatory regime in relation to the area I'm going into? So you have to delve into through various laws, regulations, and the likes. And once you are able to navigate through that, you have the investor comfortable that, yes, I'm able to go through these challenges, so to speak, that investor set up, and you are able to operate your company in a way that you'll find profitable. Now, what is the government doing in relation to, you need to set up, for instance, a fintech, or you need to set up a microfinance, but you need to set up an industry. Instead of looking through various laws, the government is looking at ways to see, okay, what do we do? How do we liberalize the sector? How do we make things simpler for investors who are coming in? And the government has, since 2020, a lot has gone into that space, and a lot is still happening. Unlike in the past, where in setting up a company, you cannot have a single man company. Today, you can set up a company in Nigeria that you have a single individual and a single director. You are allowed to do that. It's only in limited sectors that you still require 2 or 3 shareholders today. In the area of foreign investment, the central bank is doing a lot in terms of how to liberalize the market to enable foreign investors come and have confidence in the economy and bringing their capital to invest in the country. That also dovetails into the tax regime in Nigeria. The tax is a major issue for investors. Currently, if you have made investment in the country, you are going to be dealing with multiple taxes that range from pay companies income tax, VAT, stamp duty, CGT, police, various sorts of levies. Now, what has this government do? What is government doing to address that key issue that investors have in relation to taxation? Last week, Lamilora did, I think, alluded to it, that the government has sort of sent bills to the National Assembly that are meant to repeal many of the existing tax laws and simplify the tax process and do away with many of the levies that ideally have lost relevance, that investors find cumbersome in relation to their operations. Also in that regard, the government is also looking at how do we ensure that we make the environment attractive for investment, and make the consumers able to afford these various products. So recently, as Hassan mentioned, the government has also started a process of granting various tax incentives in relation to various products: CNG removed from tax, diesel removed from tax, and various other products that the government has worked on. And another area that investors who have issues with relation to taxation, back to tax again, has to do with the withholding of tax that apply in relation to companies operating in the country. There was a time that as a small company, you can do business, have tax withheld on your income, and you are unable to utilize the tax withheld on your income as a form of tax credit. But what has the government done? That process has now been made simpler. As an investor, if you have provided service and taxes withheld on your income today, and you don't have to necessarily wait for any tax credit note that will happen in the past that delay utilization of such credit. Today, you are allowed to just show evidence that, oh, this tax has been withheld, this is the receipt that shows that tax has been withheld. Whether remitted or not to the tax authority, you are allowed to apply that rate in relation to filing your tax returns. And government has also reduced withholding tax rate on various forms of payment to companies, so that in a way that rate that used to be about 5-10% have been reduced to 2.5% to ensure that the cash flow of players in the economy is not unduly hampered, so they are able to have various funds that are utilized to carry out their operations. Lastly, one major issue that we should mention, one major issue that people talk about in Nigeria, it's you talk to investors, say, oh, power is a problem. Yes, power issues are being addressed. We have the Electricity Act that has sort of liberalized the power sector, unlike in the past where people that can generate power were limited. Today, anybody, state, individuals, companies, as long as you have the capacity to generate power to run your operations, you are allowed today to obtain license to run your operations and generate power for yourself with minimal restrictions related to your operations. So the government is doing a lot, and they also plan to do a lot in relation to help investors have confidence in the economy, which is in line with the president's agenda that say between now and 2013, we want Nigeria to have a $1 trillion economy. And they are doing all what they can to ensure that that is hopefully achieved in the next 6 years.
Thank you so much. And so now I move to you, Chuma. So you are in the banking sector. How do you see all of this that we're talking about? How is it playing out in the banking sector? We know that there's a recapitalization going on in that sector, and it's one of the sectors that no matter what's going on in the economy, it does well. Tell us, what are the secrets?
Yeah, no, thank you, Fumi, and thank you to the panelists for shedding critical light on some of the positives that frankly are emerging within Nigeria as we speak today. The banking sector has not been immune from, let's call it, the historical challenges that Nigeria's economy has gone through. And frankly, the banking sector has also taken some responsibility for some of the stabilization initiatives that we've underscored so far, specifically around inflation. I think it'll be known to all on this panel and certainly in the audience that the Central Bank of Nigeria has been very adamant on bringing inflation down. Yes, banks benefit from higher interest rates, but in this particular regime, I mean, banks, have had to also pay their fair share when it comes to things like the credit reserve requirements, which in Nigeria is now 50%. But we certainly think it's the right thing from just, getting inflation under control. I think the banks and the regulator, which is the Central Bank of Nigeria, have been working quite well to push economic diversification, which I think is almost as equally important in a place like Nigeria as economic growth, because we want that economic growth to be sustainable over the long term. Economic growth in Nigeria has typically been tied to the price and production of oil and gas. And one thing that the central bank has been quite clear on is moving or making progress on the non-oil economy. Now, as Access Bank, we've been very focused on expanding beyond the shores of Nigeria. And what are we trying to do in those very, very intentional efforts? We are trying, especially on the back of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, our goal is to almost build a railroad that Nigerian companies can ride on in expanding into the continent, because frankly, We see bigger opportunities for Nigerian businesses to trade with Ghana, to trade with Cote d'Ivoire, to trade with Kenya, to trade with South Africa. Even something as recent as the Dangote refinery, right? They have to sell those refined products somewhere, and globally there's already a well-working value chain around, oil and gas or refined products. But again, a lot of African countries need those refined products. And again, because access is present in those countries, we're connecting a customer like Dangote to new clients that would offtake those refined products. So just giving a specific example as to how the banking sector is opening up new markets for Nigerian businesses, because ultimately, going beyond the shores of Nigeria is important because the exports tend to be services-led, tend to be not necessarily crude oil related, and frankly will support the sustainability, economic diversification that we're all looking for, and really create, I think, a more sustainable Africa at large.
Thank you so much. And last but not the least, I come to you, Chuks. Chuks operates in the aviation industry. Can you tell us what you see or what you're expecting to see or the opportunities that are there in the Nigerian aviation sector right now?
I'll just use my voice. So, first of all, Nigeria is big. We are talking about 923,000 square kilometers of massive land, 220 million people, 36 states plus the FCT. And, well, of course, on the flip side, there are infrastructural challenges, access roads. This creates a massive opportunity for mobility. And I've listened to all of the fantastic conversations here. And I'll just add one thing, right? The people who are responsible for this transformation, they need to move around. And that is where the opportunity exists for aviation. In terms of exports, I mean, people say Nigeria is the heart of Africa, but I think Nigeria is the buckle of Africa. Nigeria is 4 hours from Dakar, 3.5 hours from Dakar, 4.5 hours from Kigali, 6 hours from Egypt, another 6 hours from South Africa. From our regional position, we have to reach to more or less connect all of Africa in Nigeria. And at VivaJets, we've done it. The last 3 years has been fantastic for us, connecting leaders, captains of industries, government officials, transporting them throughout Africa via our airplanes. And we are not even able to cover the demand. It's massive because we have huge interconnectivity problems. To fly from Lagos to Libreville, which is 1 hour, 20 minutes flight time, would take you either 4 hours, 30 minutes to Addis Ababa, maybe a 4-hour wait, and another 4 hours to Gabon. Or you might choose to go do 6.5 hours to Paris, and another 7 hours back to Libreville. So what we've seen by virtue of doing business, these aren't projections, these are historical figures. We've seen a huge demand for mobility within Africa, and Nigeria sits right at that geographical point where we can all connect that demand. Nigeria is a signatory to the Single Air Africa Travel Market, which more or less, the ambition is to collapse the borders more or less within Africa. And what that has done is it has created a situation where each African state that is a signatory to this SAATM is more or less a state in a single country, liberalizing the border accesses and enabling economic activity aviation economic activity between these countries. So I'd say, just to cap it up, I know we have time considerations. I think I have invested in Nigeria. I can say that, I mean, I've worked in different parts of the world, but I would say that the opportunities that exist in Nigeria are actually boundless. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chuks. And I'm going to cap it up. Everyone has spoken very well, but I cannot allow us to end those discussions without talking about agriculture. In terms of agriculture, there are a lot of opportunities there. If you look at most of the products that Nigeria produces in terms of commodities, we have either the best quality or the best volume or the highest volumes. And you know, it's currently, agriculture currently contributes about 22% of the GDP. Unfortunately, we don't have so much of processing capacity. So there's a lot of opportunity to partner maybe with local businesses or come in based on some of the ease of doing business that we've talked about today to set up factories or partner with a local investor already and try to do something in the agricultural sector. So I just wanted to add that as well. Before we end today, I would like to go back to all my panelists and just take like 2 minutes wrap up, sell Nigeria in 2 minutes. Damilola, I start from you.
Yeah, maybe I should just continue from where you stopped.
Yes.
So, you know, food security is key for a population of over 220 million people. So, thinking about all what she said and the opportunities Nigeria has, yam, Nigeria is probably the largest producer in Africa and probably the world. Cassava, cocoa, you know, we produce cocoa. Third largest producer in the world. I think Ghana is second or so. Cashew, ginger, and sesame seed and all of that. So realistically, we don't produce all this in large quantities. You know, there's need to invest in processing capabilities, storage facilities, logistics and distribution facilities. The truth is that Nigerians like food. So the moment you can make the food available, rice is the staple food that we eat every day. So I dare say that if we make investment in this sector, there's going to be attractive returns. There's also the aspect of solid minerals that we have not even exploited at all. Everyone's talking about oil and gas. You know, Australia today, a population of 20 million people, exports about $330 billion US in their solid minerals. Look at Nigeria with a vast, extensive amount of solid mineral resources, and we are still where we are. So again, that's another opportunity to invest in those sectors. But a lot of work needs to be done, feasibilities, technical study, and all of that. But before I stop, I just want to say that, you know, a country like ours that is probably 50% of, you know, the entire West African population says a lot. By the time the African Free Trade Continental Agreement becomes fully operationalized, then you know that Nigeria is a major player. If you want to do anything in Africa and you're not in Nigeria, then you're wasting your time. So let me just put it that way, just to let you know that Nigeria is the place to go.
Thank you. And Damilola, before I move away from you, I just wanted to use one of the foreign investors in Nigeria, TGI, as an example. Some of the things that they've been able to achieve as they moved into agriculture and some of those things. You and I were talking about it before this.
Yeah. So TGI is a very is an ingenious company, both local, but yet, you know, continental in nature. They operate and serve the entire African market. Indeed, they export rice, soya, a lot of commodities. And today, they are meeting the needs of, you know, not just Nigeria, but a lot of the African continent. So look, if you begin to look at a major rice producer, you will see Wakot Rice. I'm not in TGI, but I don't work for TGI, but I can see what they're doing. They are exporting extensively. They have plants in Kebbi, in northern markets, where they're doing not just production, but also processing, you know, and export. So I think that's just a typical example of what we can see, including the Dangote fertilizer plant that just came on board. So yeah, Nigeria is the place to be.
All right, thank you. Over to you, Chuma.
Okay, I'll keep it brief.
minutes.
So the average comes down to 2 minutes. So really, the starting point is what we've talked about, which is at a macro level, the currency is very cheap. Most experts would agree. So I think there's not been a better time in the last few years to invest in Nigeria just from that particular macro point of view. Then when you go sort of one level, deeper, I mean, public markets in Nigeria, I think have been battered from a valuation point of view, present significant opportunities for anyone who's looking to gain exposure to the Nigerian investment story. The third and final thing I will say, and perhaps this is coming from I should disclose that I work for a bank and Nigeria's largest bank, so of course I'll say this. I mean, if you don't have time to do the homework, or for whatever reason you don't have access to a ton of information, again, most of Nigeria's banks are listed. Many of them are in the process of raising capital at this time. So maybe this is my opportunity to say, invest in the Nigerian banking sector because it's a fantastic opportunity. Just looking at, again, low price to book, low PE ratios, and again, you get full exposure to the broader economy because the banks, of course, have touch points with clients like TGI and clients in all sorts of sectors across the economy. So if you don't have time to do the work, but you have capital to deploy, public markets, Nigerian banking sector, do it and do it now.
Thank you. And before I move on, just to let you know, if you're considering that, a lot of those banks for this year, this current financial year, they are on track to declare some very, very wonderful profits. I'm sure they wouldn't want me to tell you what their profits would be like, but I can tell you that it's phenomenal and they haven't ever gotten to that level before. So like he said, this is the best time to, if you have funds to deploy, maybe you have a fund. I mean, I know some of the multilateral bodies deploy some of their funds even through the banking sector. That's something you can do and you get good returns on it. So I come to you now, Joseph, 2 minutes.
Thank you. I agree with you, Ma. This is the best time to invest in Nigeria. But why you do that? You don't test the river, the depth of the river with your 2 legs. So you to be certain, you talk to those who are in the field, who to guide you appropriately on the legal regime, on what you need to know, what you need to know. Because I say that guidedly. I say that with all sense of responsibility. Because my practice of over 15 years, over 70% of my time is devoted to advising foreign investors on investment in Nigeria, lenders, equity investors, and we guide them on how to invest. And as part of that work, I have also devoted quite some time to advising investors who have made the wrong decisions, who have done something not contrary to the law when they come to make investment. For instance, you come and invest in Nigeria, you don't have what we call a certificate of capital importation. Why? So you just brought in money and you invested, right? You didn't get a lawyer to guide you as to what you need to do. So you struggle to repatriate your fund, and then you say, oh, you have difficulty repatriating your fund. So you need to talk to people that can guide you appropriately so that before you put your leg down, you know what you are doing, that you know you are properly guided and you are on course. And then with that, you can hardly get things wrong.
Thank you. And Joseph just introduced you guys to what people like about Nigerians. He just gave you one of our proverbs. I hope you were able to figure that out. Gbenga, over to you.
Yeah, no, thanks. I think one sector that we didn't talk about, which is probably currently one of our biggest exports, is our creative sector.
Yeah.
I walked into a shop yesterday in St. Christopher's Place. Anyone that knows St. Christopher's Place, very small off Oxford Street. Mm-hmm. And they were playing ashake in a boutique. So it wasn't like that I was in a big store, small store, and they're playing ashake. And it just seemed normal, right? The reality is that we've been able to create an industry out of nothing. And it's gone global. Afrobeats right now is global. Many of you may not know, you may be too old, but if you ask your kids, I'm sure they'll tell you as well. The film sector as well, Nollywood is growing significantly. There's been significant investments that's coming as well. So the reality is that Nigeria, and that's why I use the word the giant, right? Not talking about Burna Boy, but the giant of Africa is moving slowly. So traditionally, 10, 20 years ago, it was just oil and gas, right? But the reality is that when you look at Nigeria today as an investor, you really need to look at a country that is moving. The wheels are maybe not moving as quick as we would like it to be, but is moving. Certain sectors are becoming more important than traditional sectors. And I think as investors, when you look into those opportunities, it's also important to also speak to local players, because at the end of the day, you can do all your security checks, KYC, etc. But if you speak to a local investor and you say, "Oh, I'm about to do a deal with this guy," and the guy says, then you know there's a problem. So you want to understand what that means, because you're not going to get that through some credit checks and all of that. So again, like I say, it's a good time. I mean, we've talked about the macros, we've talked about the sectors, but again, I think what the lawyer said is critical. It's always important to go with your eyes wide open, ensure that you're doing deals with the right people, ensure you're working with local people on ground who understand the market and can guide you, and to ensure that at the end of the day, when you make, because like I said, we're a PE fund. For us, exits is key. So when we make our exits and we turn capital to investors, we want to make sure that we've done everything right. We've gotten our capital importation certificate such that there are no issues, and we're able to access the CBN or whatever currency market exists at the time.
Thank you so much. And lastly, I come to you, Chooks. Last words, 2 minutes, so that we can have questions.
I think the richest black man alive is Nigerian, and he lives in Nigeria, works in Nigeria. I was fortunate to meet him at the Africa CEO Forum, and he said he doesn't even, hold any other passport. He's more or less resident Nigerian. So I think he's seeing something that some of us are not seeing. On the aviation side, Nigeria recently ratified the Cape Town Convention into its laws, which is basically a protection for mobile assets. So what it means is for people who have invested in aircraft that are being leased or financed to Nigerian companies, they can recover these airplanes without even, speaking to the lessee. With a single phone call to the DG of the NCAA, the aircraft can be grounded at any Nigerian airport. This is for cases where, financing deals go bad or leases go bad, where repayments are not coming as agreed. So that offers, protection to investors who have brought out the capital to finance or lease airplanes to Nigerian companies. I think is super massive for Nigeria. It is one of the recent by the Ministry of Aviation, and I think that serves as, one of the best, barriers, or not barriers, but I would say, protection for potential investors in the Nigerian aviation sector. So Nigeria is open. Like my colleagues here have said, it's a giant that is moving, maybe moving as a 900-ton gorilla, but it's moving. And Nigeria is getting it right. If Nigeria gets it right, Africa will get it right. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And so now I would like to open it up for questions. Do we have any questions? Let me see the hands that I have. Any questions? 1, 2, 3, 4. So I start with 1. Thank you.
When it comes to the agricultural business, any certain states that you recommend? In addition to any certain government incentives that are given to this industry?
Okay. Any takers?
Any sectors?
Agriculture, the states that you would recommend.
Any certain state or states that you recommend for agricultural business?
Yeah, so there are a lot of states that are favorable to certain commodities across the country.
Yeah.
Cassava in the southwest, cocoa, some part of southwest, rice in the north, Kebbi, yeah, Taraba, thereabout. Yeah, cashew spread across. I don't know on top of my head, but I mean, there's some. I work with EY, so I can always guide you on where to go in that regard.
And I can also add, like he said, it depends on the commodity you're trying to get. It's not all the states that have all the commodities. So the commodities will determine the state. So when you recognize the commodities you want to go after, then you can be better advised, what to do. I also work for Pearl Mutual Consulting, and we also do business advisory. So we can also, and maybe be cheaper than. Yeah, so that's it. Sorry. I had to say that. All right, so, but as to the government incentives, there are so many incentives that government is also putting in place to ensure that, companies can go into agriculture. So, but the product that you're going into is what will determine, that's how we'll be able to advise you the kind of incentives that are available, and all those we can always get to you. Thank you.
Yeah, I think just to add in relation to that incentive for agricultural company, well, probably in most cases you have your tax free, your profit. So subject to what? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have
yeah,
that.
we had spoken about taxes earlier, so that's why I didn't mention that anymore. Okay, so let's go to number two. Number two, I think you are number two. Number two, who is number two? I think it's him. I think you were number 4, sir. Or no, yeah. I think number 2, number 3, then you are number 4. Yeah.
Okay, just a clarification. I'm the trade commissioner from Flanders, Belgium. The richest person in Africa is now John Ruppert with 13.9 billion.
Yeah, when he said that, I was like, devaluation of the naira.
No, but it's only black. It's the richest black person.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So my question first, how are you going to compete with your neighbor, Ghana, who's also going to work on the refinery sector? We are in Belgium, we are the second largest refinery hub from Europe, as you may know. And it took us 20 years to build up that refinery hub in Antwerp, which is the largest and most comprehensive one. The reason why it was like that is because the big companies from Germany, they were the ones who invested in Antwerp because to have access to the sea.
Yeah.
If you have all these localization laws, I don't see how these big companies are going to come to Ghana or in Nigeria competing in the local market. So that's my question, in fact. How are you going to compete with Ghana? And secondly, how are you going to comply with the big majors? How are you going to comply with your localization laws, which is a big issue, of course?
So I mean, again, I think the reality is that we invest in SMEs, but without blowing Dangote's trumpet, the reality is that if you go to what he's created, the Lekki Free Trade Zone, it's amazing. Yes, he had to do a lot of it by himself because the infrastructure deficit that was noted is an issue. But what that's what has created is going to crowd in a lot more, right? So the reality is that replicating you don't have to do what Dangote, because again, I mean, there's no point building another 650 capacity in Nigeria, right? But the reality is that creating that has meant that the infrastructure that needs to be put in has been put in. So you're going to see a lot of smaller players build off that infrastructure. So for example, in the Lekki Free Trade Zone as well, the berthing, so for example, one of the challenges that Nigeria had was that the size of ships were limited because of the key ports. The depth of the new ports has been increased. On the back of that, you're seeing DP World is recently signed to develop a port themselves. So the reality is that because it's been done, like most things, getting it done is the initial hiccup. Once it's been done, people are now looking to see, not necessarily to replicate it at Dangote's level, but to see that it's been done. We can ride up some of that infrastructure, we can ride up some of that learning, and we can essentially develop the infrastructure. Now, how are we going to compete with Ghana? My brother is, where's my colleague from my Ghanaian colleague? The reality is that we're a growing population in Africa. Africa is the growth population of the world. The other regions are declining, right? I won't borrow what Charlie said earlier, but the other regions are declining. In a growing population like ours, the demand for fuel, the demand for mobility, we are probably, it's going to take us some time to pivot to EVs, right? So products, petroleum products and that like is going to continue. And obviously there's the energy transition where we're using gas, which is why the E&I guy is talking about how he's seen a lot of gas projects. So the reality is that the demand is growing in our backyard. We've relied on the Europeans to provide us with the supply, and now we're going to provide ourselves with the supply. And I think that's going to change the narrative. So are we going to have another Dangote in Ghana? I don't know. But the reality is that if Ghana builds a petroleum plant, it will find a market, because right now that market is coming in. We're importing. So why not produce it on the ground, in country, and ensure that we benefit from some of that value add, right? So we're not just exporting and importing refined products.
Thank you. And I may just add, Dangote already has a network around sub-Saharan Africa through the cement company that he has. So he's not going to be selling, yes, it's a different product, but he already has demand, just like Chuma. He already has his distribution channels and stuff already existing. And I don't think our economy is increasingly becoming localized. I think we're becoming more liberal and looking for external players to come in more. Now I go to number 3, sorry, because of our time. Yeah, 1 minute, please.
So thankfully, you just mentioned Dangote and Freezer, which was actually slightly worrying, because I didn't hear anything about the Freezer regime in Nigeria. So we majorly focus on Nigerians in the diaspora and foreign investors investing in Nigeria as well. And the one thing that we hear mostly is generally benefits of investing in Freezer. So if you're doing property investments, you're worrying about investing your FX in Nigeria, where there's an obvious problem, which is investing in the Naira. But when you're investing in Freezer, you're essentially investing in FX property as well. And when doing business, so if you're in business in Freezer, so you're tapping into all Freezer benefits as well.
Okay.
No duties and like, so wouldn't you usually advise investors, regardless of what sector you're in, to invest or to look into investing in Nigeria?
Take the lot smarter people on this side.
You want to take it?
So first of all, there are federal government-owned free zones too, and there are lots of private sector-owned. The truth is that you may not have capacity to probably provide real estate services in most of those free zones. They have limited capacity, basically, that's what I'm trying to say. So the emergence of free zones are just beginning to emerge, basically. We don't have enough of them. So it's limited when you're telling people, come and invest in free zone, or come and do this. How many do we really have? Lekki Free Trade Zone, already almost fully occupied. You know, we have Kano, Calabar, Then you have Lagos and you have Lekki. All that whole area is fully saturated. So which other free zones? So what I'm saying is government on its own is now taking it upon itself to now develop free zones. Reason being that that's the next channel for industrialization in Nigeria, right? So beyond maybe real estate or anything, you want to do anything productive, you need to go through a free zone in order to have all the infrastructure and, you know, tax free benefits and all of that, pioneer status or whatever you call it, in those areas. So we're not there yet. I think we're just beginning to grow.
All right, thank you. I mean, we could speak more about that, yeah, but there are advantages and disadvantages of those things. I have a client in the free trade zone, yeah, where there's still space for some of those constructions that you want to do. But it's also when you want to do some things, especially if you are not immediately exporting, you may have some challenges. Let's take our last question.
Okay, I think my question will be to the aviation expert and of course the general question.
Yes, thank you.
So his presentation identified, you know, the strategic position of Nigeria and the profit that can come from that. I spent 24 hours coming from Vietnam to come to London, 24 hours, leaving even foreign investors out. The question is, isn't Nigerians investors really come together to take advantage of this opportunity that you mentioned? Why is it taking this long, you know, for something that is Nigerian come to solve the, you know, traveling within, not just traveling within West Africa, you know, tapping into the kind of opportunity you mentioned.
Thank you. I think there's yeah. I think there's a huge mystery attached to aviation, especially in Africa, and most especially in Nigeria. And I don't know why until this day. I've had several conversations with a lot of investors here, and everybody seems to feel that aviation is too mysterious, right, to throw funds into. But I think aviation is one of the most straightforward, you know, streams, if you ask me. Highly regulated, almost everything is inside a book, right? And the opportunities that are present, not just the opportunities, the problems. You don't have to think outside the box, right? There's no new way to fly an airplane. There's no new way to land an aircraft, right? It's the same simple way, but for some reason, investors are shying away from investing in aviation in Nigeria. But I can tell you that there are conversations around investments going into airports. There are new airport developments in Nigeria. State governments are now even taking the mantle from the private sector and investing in airlines, investing in their own aerodromes, right? If you look at some of the success stories out of Africa, like Ethiopian Airlines, for example, Ethiopian Airlines is a huge, you know, FX seller to its own government, right? So to reiterate, I really don't know why, but the opportunities are there.
We have actually run out of time.
Mm-hmm.
The key to that is access to finance. A lot of these people, because it's actually hugely capital intensive, they don't have the access to capital. So they need some partnership with foreign investors a lot of times to get it done. It's a lot of investment in that sector. I think
Access Bank will fund.
Access Bank will fund. Maybe. All right. All right. I hope that we have been able to. Pardon? We've run out of time. Yes. Oh, so sorry. Maybe what I can say is, if you still have a few questions, we're around after the panel so that we can release. And also, we have a lot of professionals from the Nigeria private sector in the room. Please, let's just wait behind to network with us before you go. Thank you so much, everyone.